Emotional intelligence and the amygdala hijack. See, it's one of the most critical parts of our emotional being. When we're hijacked, when our emotions completely take over, and all of us are exposed to it, all of us experience it. Very few of us are phenomenal in this area of managing and affecting our emotional state. It affects us all in different ways. Some of us get angry, some of us get completely defensive, some of us completely just shut down. Some of us just feel overwhelmed. Some of us give up. Some of us just avoid that scenario from that point forward. But we're all subject to it. So in this video, I want to talk about what is an emotional or amygdala hijack. And then what are some things that you can do? Some very specific, very effective strategies that you can use to counter that so that it doesn't have the impact. Brief story, I'm about 8 years old, and my family, we go camping in the Blue Ridge Mountains. My older brother and I decide we're going to wake up before the sun and before my parents and sneak out of the tent. So we sneak out of the tent before dawn, make sure we don't wake my parents, and we walk down this little tiny path deep into the woods looking for a bear. Looking for a bear. Of course, as we walk, we're walking nervously, anxiously, thinking what's going to happen. Part of the function of the amygdala. The amygdala is more or less the emotional center or the alarm center for the emotional brain, deep in the back of your head. And the amygdala releases something called norepinephrine to your brain, heightens your senses around what might be dangerous. And if you do that too often, it can create flooding. So if you're worried about something, stressed about something over and over and over again, it can get you close to a tipping point. So we're walking into the woods looking for a bear. We get pretty far into the woods. All of a sudden, we hear this sound, this roaring sound. My brother and I, we turn and we bolt. Instantly, we sprint back towards the campground. I remember everything from the run. I remember the path. I remember this branch that had fallen across the path that had two branches coming off it. I remember leaping over that branch. And I remember my brother getting a little further ahead of me and saying, "Hey, wait." I remember getting back to the campground next to the canvas tent, breathing a sigh of relief and thinking, now we're safe. Thinking, so canvas tent, if a bear is really chasing us, but feeling, okay, we're all right. Look up. There's a jet plane flying over. That was our bear. That was our bear. But the amygdala, see, here's the function of the amygdala, and here's how it works. It gets us ready for something dangerous, something out of the ordinary, something that we need to fight or flight. You've all heard fight or flight. But it takes all the things that your conscious brain is doing, thousands, 5,000, 6,000 for most of us, things that it's evaluating, looking at, calculating at any given moment, and it boils them down to a question that says, do I eat it or does it eat me? Thinking that it's a bear. Do I eat it or does it eat me? So I don't notice the robin's nest. I don't notice the foliage. I don't notice the fungi on the side of the trees when all of a sudden I hear that sound. And I think, uh-oh, do I eat it or does it eat me? I decide it's going to eat me. I'm out of here. Takes over the brain, hijacks the whole brain, stops all logical, conscious functioning. Says, I'm in charge, get me out of here. Also floods the body with energy, with adrenaline to say, get ready to run. Tells your stomach, stop digesting because I need that energy right now. I don't need to digest because that won't be energy available for a little while. So it does all these things. In the moment, see, every signal that comes into our brains, touch, taste, smell, feel, sight, it gets split into two signals, and the shorter, more abbreviated signal goes to the amygdala in about half the time that it takes to get anywhere else. The amygdala makes a judgment. It's a brief signal. It's not complete. That roaring, not a complete signal. Oh, it could be a bear. Already worried about a bear. How does this affect your life? How often, now you don't meet bears, but how often does someone say something and the amygdala is saying, I don't like that. I don't like that. It links, ooh, don't like that. Or it links fear. Oh, I don't know if I can handle this. Or doubt. Or shutdown. Or overwhelm. See, it triggers all these things and it takes us on this path. It's like the bottom of the iceberg that I talk about in another video about emotional intelligence. But it takes our iceberg, it moves our whole emotional state very quickly. So now getting an understanding of that, I want to talk about how to deal with it. I'm going to give you a very brief formula. It's called SOSS. SOS for help. SOSS though. Stop, oxygenate, strengthen the heart, and survey the situation. Let's start with stop. Stop means interrupt. Interrupt in that moment. Almost we get because it's not even a conscious thing when the emotions get linked to it. How do we stop that moment? How do we take the needle off the record player? Thomas Jefferson loved to say, when I get upset about something, I count to 10, and if that doesn't work, I count to 100. Another, and I think more effective tool, is something called pattern interrupt. And let me give you a few of those. It's a way to change your focus instantly. Change your focus instantly. What's a pattern interrupt? Something that breaks in to your world and makes that emotion, that feeling, that direction you're going, yanks it from the unconscious, from the non-conscious, from the just pure habit into something you're completely aware of from a rational, logical, conscious perspective. Make it conscious. Make it conscious. Great way to do this is to measure it. Your conscious brain, the logical part of your brain, the IQ part of your mind, does all measuring, putting things on scales. I like one thing I call the best friend scale. If this were happening to my best friend, if this exact scenario were happening to my best friend, what would I tell him? How bad is it? Scale of 1 to 10, how bad is it? It's a 7 out of 10, it's pretty bad. It's a 4 out of 10. Not that bad. Not the end of the world. Not the end of the world. Not the end of the world. See, the neat thing about this is as soon as it's happening to someone else, could be your best friend, could be your child, could be your great-great-grandchild that you've never met. But if you fast forward in time, great pattern interrupt. Crazy, not real. If you fast forward in time a few generations and you meet one of your great-great-great-grandchildren and this exact scenario is happening to them, how bad would you say it is? 1 to 10, it's a 5, it's a 6, it's an 8. And then what would you guide them to doing? You know what? Don't let it get to you. Don't overreact. So great pattern interrupt. Great way to make something not conscious to conscious is to put it on a scale, and I call it the best friend or great-great-great-grandchild scale. And immediately ask, if I were telling one of my friends or a family member how to deal with this, how bad would it really be to them, first of all? And then where would I guide them to go? Think of something completely different from that moment. For example, something silly, something goofy, something crazy. People say in public speaking, picture the audience in their underwear, because it interrupts that pattern of creating nervousness and the amygdala saying, oh, you're worried, you're scared, you can't handle this. So it interrupts that pattern. Think about all the rules that you're making up about that person or that scenario. No one should ever say that. Never and always create amygdala hijack. Another great pattern interrupt is to picture yourself like the king. Everybody should do exactly what I'm saying. It's called cognitive restructuring. Taking that example to an extreme and realizing how silly, how foolish your rules are in that moment. Someone's saying something to you, they should never do that, and picture yourself with a crown. No one should ever say something like that to me. Great way to interrupt your pattern. So that's on the stop phase. You can also ask, what would Gandhi do? Or what would Lincoln do? Gandhi, at one point in his life, a woman brings her son to him to say, my son's diabetic and he won't stop eating sugar. Can you ask him to stop eating sugar? He'll listen to you. And Gandhi asked the woman to come back with her son 2 weeks later. She had walked 2 days to get there and 2 days back. Comes back 2 weeks later, another 2 days walking. So 8 days altogether walking there and back, there and back. 2 weeks later, at the meeting, Gandhi says, please stop eating sugar. And the woman, as she's leaving the room, looks back at Gandhi and she says, why couldn't you say that 2 weeks ago? And Gandhi said, 2 weeks ago, I was still eating sugar. We all hear the expression, walk a mile in the other person's shoes. There's an example of that. So stop in the moment. Part of the stop phase could be, what would Gandhi do? Gandhi would live in their world for a little while. He wouldn't be angry or upset or worried or nervous. He would say, how can I live in that person's world? How can I truly live? Stop eating sugar for 2 weeks. So part of the stop process, what would Lincoln do? Lincoln at one point said to a friend of his, he says, I don't like that fellow much. I'll have to get to know him better. And one of his favorite expressions, used it in his second inaugural speech, and it's carved in the Lincoln Memorial. It says, judge not that you be not judged. So how often am I judging? Because you've been where that person is that's triggering, and you've been in that scenario. Somebody's driving, they cut you off. All the scenarios that could be going into that. Walk a mile, stop eating sugar. Get to know that fellow better so you like them. So that's part of the stop phase. Let's go to oxygenate. Deep, deep breaths. And it could mean you have to leave the scenario, which could be part of stop as well. You may have to walk away. Very often that's one of the most effective tools. But deep breaths. The amygdala shuts off this part of your brain. Your brain needs oxygen again. Take deep breaths. Take them through your stomach. Feel your stomach move out and in as you're breathing. Hold your hands on your stomach and feel it go. Count to 4 as you breathe in. It forces you to take deep, deep breaths. Breathe through your nose. Forces a lot of oxygen, almost like holding paddles on your brain to jumpstart it again, to get the air the oxygen flowing to it that it needs for the conscious part to start functioning again, while the amygdala is trying to say stop. So oxygenate. The next step, the second S, SOSS, strengthen your heart. And this has to do with remembering the positive, thinking of the great things, the wonderful things, the amazing things in your world, counting your blessings. Think on amazing memories, imagery. Your brain loves imagery. So think of a couple peaceful experiences. Think of a cool pond. Think of your last time on the beach. Think of your children, playing with your children. You know, another one, and I don't know where you are spiritually, but another one, Paul, the Christian New Testament writer, says, have no anxiety at all, but through prayer and thanksgiving, offer everything up to God. And just that picture of have no anxiety at all. And it's funny, he wasn't an armchair philosopher like so many people are today. He was in prison in Rome when he wrote that. So he was going through some tough times, but have no anxiety at all, but through prayer and thanksgiving, offer everything up to God. And, you know, like I said, I don't know where you are spiritually, but take some time. I've spent a lot of time in my life doing this. Take some time, and I continue to step back and try to figure out what you believe and why you believe what you believe. One of the leading causes for emotional intelligence being on the decline in our culture is that we've kind of gone into this individualist approach. You know, I can handle everything on my own. I don't need any help. And the reality is we do. We need it from friends, from family. We need it from a higher power. So figure that part out in your life. I have a good friend that says, challenges all the time to spend a few minutes every day in what he calls the classroom of silence. Just, you know, I go to a church and sit quietly and for a few minutes every day. And when that's part of my life, hijackings will go dramatically down. And when that's not part of my life, they go up. So one way to strengthen your heart. Another way is to deepen friendships with other people. Pick one or two people in your world and say, you know what, I need to build a better friendship, because you need an emotional support structure. And then in that moment, the stop, the oxygen, the strength in your heart, think of that friend. Think of that friend. Think of the encouraging words they give you. Think of the nourishing experiences you have with that friend. Part of the survey process is examining the moment, figuring out the recipes. What went into this response? What's part of this response for me? What recipes work? What recipes don't work? And you can use another acronym, another model I won't go into too much depth on, but it's called SOCS, S-O-C-S, situation, options with an S at the end, consequences, and solution. It's actually a model that a lot of schools use with young children to teach emotional intelligence. I've been using it with my daughter, who's now 6, but starting even when she was 5, we just worked on the S and the O in the beginning. We didn't call it situation, we called it story. What's the story? What happened? What's the story? What's going on? What are the options for responses? And I want you to think through this from your perspective. This is in the survey mode again. Remember, this is after the moment, after you've stopped, oxygenated, and strengthened your heart. But it's in the survey mode, looking back, what's going on here? What could I have done? What worked? What didn't work? But what was the situation? What are the options for my responses? But also think through the people involved. What are the options for why they behaved or responded or reacted or did what they did? What are the options? And it's critical with the S at the end that there are many, many, many options to how you could have responded, and many, many options to why they did what they did. Recognizing that helps us to not let it be a hijack. So SO, and then C, consequences. What are the consequences for each of the options that we've outlined? And it's a dynamic process. You may revisit it and add a few more options, and then as a result add more consequences. Could be plus and minuses, could be good and bad, which is what I do with my 6-year-old. Good and bad. If I do that, what's good, what's bad? If I do that, what's good and what's bad? And then as a result, as you're surveying this whole process, reliving, examining this process, what's my proposed solution and why? Why do I pick that one? Why do I pick that one? Socks. Once again, I'm Jonathan Fanning, and I truly hope that this serves you, that this makes a difference in your life. Practice what we've talked about today. Practice it and teach it to a friend or two. You teach it to a few friends, it'll help cement it in your mind. Try it in a few scenarios. It'll help cement it in your mind. You can get much better at this than you currently are. You might be pretty good. You may be really good, but you can get better. You may be awful, but you can get better. It's critical that you do. You're supposed to do some great things with your life. And managing these emotional hijackings is part of helping you to become who you're capable of becoming. Thanks for the chance to serve you. Thanks for the chance to add value to your life.